Art Scrimo, and I'm one of the product managers here at Cisco, and I'm here to introduce you to the brand new software download and release of Data Center Network Manager version 11. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here to one of my test environments and show you, or introduce you to some new features we have inside of DCNM 11. This new feature we're going to talk about today is a new feature called SAN Insights. So this is a feature within DCNM 11 that allows you to gather the telemetry data that we are producing on our 32 gig platform. That includes the 9700 as well as the 9132T. And in the future, we'll support also the 9148T and 9396T. We're going to go over some of the new features. I'm going to start with the configuration of SAN Insights. So SAN Insights is configured under the configure area in a feature called SAN Insights. So what we've done is we've created this stepped process that takes you through the entire process of configuring SAN Insights. It's very simple, actually. And so how you do this is you click Continue. You select the fabric that you're looking at. In this case, I'm looking at this fabric. It's one of our test fabrics. And what it'll do is it'll go out there and query the switches in this fabric and find if there's any switches that have, one, the correct release, which is NXOS 831, and it's also going to be looking for the SAN Insights license, and that resides on the switch itself. As you can see, we have two switches out here that have these capabilities, and so they're actually already running with installed queries, meaning we've configured them to already start sending their telemetry data. So I can show you a little bit about how we do this. What you can do is you can select some switches if you want to make some changes. Click Continue, and now you'll get sort of the list of modules and the number of interfaces out here. And one of the switches, we have 14 interfaces that have telemetry running on it. Additionally, another switch, which is 9710, that has 11 interfaces. So we can scroll through that and see those. Now, if some of these weren't enabled, obviously they all are enabled, but if they weren't enabled, we can enable them quite simply by enabling and disabling them. So in this case, I can disable this port if I wanted to. As you can see, we have a pending disable now on this port, which means it'll stop sending telemetry data. That's the only thing that we are suspending or disabling. The actual port itself will stay online and continue to pass traffic. We just won't be doing any telemetry visualization or data gathering on that port now. So if I click Continue here, I'll get a summary of the changes that I'm going to make. As you can see, we're disabling port FC1/15, and we're going to install enable the analytics and telemetry and copy running to startup. If I wanted to make this change right now, I would click Commit. I'm not going to do that because the switch is actually running telemetry data already. Okay, so now we've got everything configured the way we want it. Let's go visualize and look at the data that we're gathering. So I'm going to start with the dashboard view. It's Dashboard SAN Insights. So this is a good place to start. What this does is it gives you sort of a high-level overview of what's happening within the view that we're looking at. Everything happens up at the top here. So we've got fabric. I can look at an individual fabric, or I can look at all of the fabrics I'm managing with this current DCNM server. I can also even look at individual switches. So if I wanted to, I could adjust this to a specific fabric. And then within that fabric, I can explore the switches that are existing out there. So now I've switched over to that 9710. So now I'm going to get information about all the hosts and the storage devices, the number of flows, and the IT pairs that are currently out there. In some of these dashlets here, we can see that there's information that pertains to different metrics. So in this case, we're looking at IT pairs and we're looking at read completion time. I could also adjust this to write completion time as well. And I can see I have the same number of pairs, but the normal pairs versus the deviated pairs look, I think, a little bit different. So let's go back and check that out. It does look a little bit different. So as you can see under the read completion time, we've got some of our IT pairs that have deviated away from their baseline by 16 to 30%, 5.1% to be exact. Some of them that are 33% would be the 1 to 15% deviation away from the baseline. And then we've got a bunch of normal pairs, 61.5, which is good, right? The more normal means that there's less ports or in this case, IT pairs or initiator target pairs that are deviating away from their baseline. Now I can see the same thing from a flow perspective. Flows are essentially exchanges within fiber channels. So I can see I've got some that are normal, 60%, which is good. We've got some that have deviated 1 to 15%, 35% of those. We've got a smaller number of deviations at 30%, and then above 30, we've got 1.4%. So pretty low number, but still it's something we probably want to investigate at some point. Um, I can also see that I've got a couple of hyperlinks here, which I will show you in just a second. But what this does is it takes you to a different page that starts to break down these storage views, host views, and IT pair views. I can see I have data access latency across the entire fabric. So this is our average read and write data access latency. So data access latency essentially is a metric that shows the response time of our end or storage devices in this case. We've got latency information, we've got outstanding I/O, we've got some IOPS and throughput. So now I can turn this back to all fabrics here, and it will update my screens for me automatically, and I can explore some of this data. Before we do that, we're going to go into something called View SAN Insight Metrics. One of the things that we wanted to do with this product was give you the ability to explore all of the metrics that we're gathering on the back end with the telemetry function. By default, you're going to land on this use case called Exchange Completion Time Analysis. We're going to provide you a bunch of information about exchange completion time, in this case for the read operation for the last 6 hours. So obviously I can change that to a bunch of different options here. I'll leave it at 6 hours, or no, maybe we'll change it to the last 5 minutes. So over the last 5 minutes, we can see that there's been some deviation on some of these, and we'll continue to get updates automatically for us, which is a great feature. So we'll go back to 6 hours here, and we can explore some of the data that we have within our view. So what we can do is we can see that there's been a lot of deviations away from the baseline. We've got an aggregated view down below, so I can see 30% of these, or 30 ITLs, or initiator target LUN pairs, have deviated, 30 of them have deviated 1 to 15%, 16 have deviated more than 30%, and 23 have deviated 15 to 30%. If I wanted to see what comprise these, I could simply click on them. And I can see that I've got some of them are initiators, some of them are targets, some of them are LUNs, and you can see any of this information by simply clicking on it. If I wanted to see what these initiators were, I could click on them. I'll get a download so I can see exactly what the initiators are that I'm looking at. I can see binning by timestamp, so this tells me how many at the time when I gathered this data from on the switch side, how many of them deviated in their own separate buckets. So 1 to 15, 15 to 30, and then above 30. So I can see all of that stuff. I can also sort based on the status, which is I think probably how a lot of people will look for this. They're going to look for the red ones, the ones that are bad, and then they're going to explore those as needed. So as in this case, I can see I've got a Red Hat server out here. I'm going to copy this WWPN for a second, and I'll show you what we're going to do with that in a sec. But I can see what the baseline here is, and I can also trend some of this data as well if I wanted to by simply clicking on the trend icon. What this will do is it'll go out and look at this initiator target and LUN based on read operation, and it will try to match other things within the database that match those. So I can see that I've got some matches here that have already correlated, and I can explore these things to find out if there's anything matching the kind of profile that I'm looking for as part of this operation. But another really cool feature we have is called custom graphing. So in this custom graphing view, what you can do is put in a WWPN. So in this case, that one that I grabbed just a second ago, and I can look at different metrics. So I can look things such as normalized read exchange completion time. I can look at write exchange completion time. I can look at data access latency. And I can also, I don't know, maybe I'll look at write data access latency as well. So what I've been able to do here is chart all of these on the same page. And when I do that, I can see how these metrics interact with each other. So for instance, I can see that the normal read data access latency, which is denoted in the orange here, is actually pretty low, but the write exchange completion time is kind of high. So that means that there's probably something going on within my fabric that's causing a bit of a, I say, slow response in the exchange completion time, or the amount of time it takes for the exchange to get to its destination. Now, what this means to me is on the write data access latency side, based on this data I see here, is that there is some impact of being able to complete the write as well on the storage end. Based on the metrics. So anyway, the great thing about this is that you can really start to explore any of the metrics that exist within our database. And as you can see, we can take away things and it'll just remove itself from the table down below, which I think is very useful. And that way you can look at exactly what you want to look at. The other cool feature we have is that you can just not just look at one chart, you can actually build multiple charts here. So I could pick another WWPN if I wanted to. I could put it in here and I can explore those as well. So you can put in multiple dimensions as we refer to it. So you can have WWPN, or you can have LUN, or target WWPN, or enclosure names. Anything that we're denoting within our database, you can search on those and then look at all the metrics that we have available, which is quite a few. Okay, so that's the custom graphing view. There's a lot of capabilities within just the dashboard alone that allows you to get to a lot of our data. But now we're going to go explore something different. So I was talking about these hyperlinks earlier, so we're going to go explore those a little bit. I want to go look at hosts because I think hosts are important in my environment as probably well as in yours. So in this case, what we're doing here is we're looking under Monitor, SAN Insights, um, or Monitor SAN Insights. And when we select that, we'll get to this page. So this is just another way to get to this same page. But in this case, when I selected host off the summary page, it's going to automatically filter me based on host. But I can also explore the storage enclosures as well as flows. So flows, as I stated earlier, are fiber channel exchanges. So we can get an IT pair view. So this is initiator and target. And now I can see how that traverses across the entire fabric. So let's go back to host enclosure real quick and I'll show you some things here. So by default, we're going to sort everything by status because, and by status, we mean the worst status to the best. So anything in green is obviously good and probably doesn't denote any deviation along the way, or nothing that's significant enough to change us over to an entire yellow or orange or red situation. So in this case, the worst we have is a deviation of 1 to 15% on average across all of the connections. So as you can see, we have a few of these statuses here are orange, but then we also have one that's yellow as well. So I can see that in this case I have an SID and a DID. I can see my WWPN from the source and the destination, as well as the fabric that this lives on. And I can explore some of the connectivity as well within the fabric. So if I zoom in here, I can get some information about what's out here. So we're providing flow level metrics here, and a lot of this data is being driven by the flow metric table below. Specifically, the normalized read and write exchange completion time are driving many of our statuses in here. But I can also get individual interface metrics as well. So if I wanted to look, for instance, at this connection, it's an N5K connection that's doing fiber channel, and I can click on it and I can get information about RX and TX. I can see any of the errors and the discards, but I can also look at any of the ISL connections as well and see what they're doing. I can move my connection around here and I can say, oh, maybe there's some information over here. As you can see, this port is very busy. I can trend this over time and I can see how busy it actually was. The other cool thing is you can actually click on this 24-hour deviation chart and it will show you exactly what deviated and up to what level. So there was a 17% deviation here, which is what essentially caused over time this to change from green to yellow in this case. Now there's one that's there. These other two are more severe. So let's click on those and let's get some information about those as well. As you can see, this deviation of read is 91% away from the baseline, so that's fairly significant, right? So that indicates some type of problem on that storage device, as well as write deviation times upwards in the 87% range. So obviously some really some things going on here. So as I explore some of this data, I can see my flow metrics from end to end here based on the source and the destination. And I can also look at the port channel or the port that I'm looking at in this case. I will get that information updated. Like for instance, this is a 9132T and it's FC1/16 that I'm looking at. And it's not really doing a whole lot, but it is doing some data, and I can see that this is just kind of up and down over time, so not really indicating a big problem, but maybe some of these ports could be more indicative of a problem in the environment. So anyway, it's a nice way to explore it. Plus, I have the ability to understand how it connects across the fabrics from end to end. So I've got this Red Hat server, and it's got connection down both of these fabrics here, and it's connecting up to one of our HDS storage devices in this case. So that's the host enclosure view. We also have a storage enclosure view. It's the same idea, but it's more from a storage perspective than it is from a host perspective. And so I can see that I've got maybe a NetApp out here that looks green. So everything's looking pretty good as far as all of the read and write exchange completion times, pretty low. Haven't really deviated very far from baseline. Obviously, this is exactly the same as the baseline. So that's one of the reasons why it's green is because there's been very little deviation away from where it normally is. And some of these metrics, you'll see that. Um, in this case, one of the things I didn't talk about was how you can go back in time and see how things have changed over time. So right now we see, like I think there's 7 storage enclosures here. But I can go back maybe a little bit further and see, oh wow, look, there were so many more online earlier. And so we've got some data generation tools out here that are beating up our fabric so that we can find issues and problems within the environment. As I went back 24 hours, you can see there was a whole lot more connections online. As I go back 42 hours, you can see that change again. If I go back 72 hours, it looks different yet again. So you can actually use this to help understand what happened. Somebody comes to you and says, oh, yesterday I was having some problem around the same time. You can say, all right, I'm going to go back 23 hours ago and see what was happening in the environment, see what was orange, see what was red, and give you an indication of what was happening and where to look within the fabric. You can also explore all the interface metrics along the way as well and see exactly what was happening within the environment. So that's the storage enclosure view. We also have a flow view. So this is more like exchanges running through the fabric. So even though these are comprised of more switch infrastructure, we're actually taking that apart and kind of zooming into just this flow. And we say, how does this flow get from source to destination? What switches does it go through? And what does some of that information look like? So we've got not very busy connectivity here. I would say some sub movement of data, but not super busy. But maybe on this side, yeah, so it's quite a bit busier because we've got a group of ISLs here between these two switches, and some of that data is being traversing that one connection into that storage device. And so I can explore the SID DID of this as well and see that we do have some deviation away from our baseline that could be causing some issues, as well as some data access latency issues. So there's quite a few metrics out here that we can help understand and drive the data that we're seeing. We're also color coding things so that it's easier to see within this environment. You can see there's quite a few that are green. Obviously green is good. Anything outside of green, you're probably going to want to investigate at some capacity. We're creating a lot of errors and slowness within this environment. So as you can see, some of our deviation is causing things to look a little bit alarming, but that's pretty normal in a test environment. Okay, so that introduces you to many of the features and functionality of of SAN Insights. There's so much more to explore in here that I didn't get time to go over today in this short video. But as if you're more interested in the product and you want to learn about how this can make a difference in your environment, please reach us at cisco.com/go/DCNM or reach out to your local account team and get a demo. Reach out to the PM organization such as myself, and we'd happy to show you any of the additional features of the product. So once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.